Have you ever noticed how the more you explain yourself, the less people seem to respect you? You clarify your intentions, you defend your choices, you give context, reasons, and justifications. And somehow, it still doesn't work. We live in a world where everyone feels pressured to explain, to be understood, validated, approved. But Stoicism teaches a brutal truth most people never accept. The need to explain is often a sign of weakness, not clarity. Strong people don't argue for their worth. They don't chase understanding. They live with such alignment that words become unnecessary. Today, we're going to break down 6 Stoic truths that will help you stop explaining yourself, reclaim your inner authority, and let your actions speak louder than anything you could ever say. If you're tired of over-talking, over-justifying, and giving power away, stay with me. And before we begin, comment this below to set the tone. My actions speak for me. 1. Explaining yourself is a sign of fear. Let's be honest about something most people won't admit. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, it's rarely about clarity. It's about fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged. Fear of losing approval, status, or connection. So you talk, you add details. You justify decisions that don't actually need justification. And every extra sentence quietly sends the same message. I need you to agree with me for me to feel okay. Stoicism calls this a dangerous mistake, because the moment your peace depends on other people understanding you, you've handed them control. Epictetus warned us about this long ago. He taught that we suffer not because of what happens, but because we place our self-worth in things outside our control, including other people's opinions. Think about it. You explain yourself at work because you want to look competent. You explain yourself in relationships because you want to look reasonable. You explain yourself to strangers online because you want to look right. But notice the pattern. The people who respect you the least are often the ones you explain yourself to the most. That's not a coincidence. The need to over-explain doesn't come from strength. It comes from uncertainty about your own position. A Stoic doesn't rush to defend his choices, not because he's arrogant, but because he's grounded. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if you live in accordance with reason and virtue, you don't need to convince anyone of anything. Your life becomes the argument. Now look at modern behavior. Long text messages trying to clear things up, emails packed with justifications, meetings where someone keeps talking, hoping the room finally nods. All of that noise is an attempt to manage perception, but Stoicism flips the script. The Stoic question is not, do they understand me? It's, am I acting in alignment with my values? If the answer is yes, then explanation is optional, not mandatory. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people miss. When you over-explain, you teach people that your boundaries are negotiable. You signal that if they push, you'll talk more. If they doubt, you'll defend. If they disrespect you, you'll try harder. And unconsciously, they learn they don't have to respect your silence. Because you don't. A Stoic understands something critical. Not everyone deserves access to your reasoning. Some people aren't confused. They're simply unwilling to respect you. And no amount of explanation fixes that. So what do you do instead? You pause. Before explaining anything, ask yourself one question. Am I explaining to clarify or to be accepted? If it's to clarify something practical, concise, and necessary, fine. But if it's to soothe your anxiety or repair your image, stop. That's where Stoic discipline begins. Silence, in this case, isn't avoidance. It's self-trust. It's saying, I know why I chose this, that's enough. When you stop explaining, something interesting happens. People either rise to meet your standards, or they reveal they were never capable of respecting you in the first place. Both outcomes are useful. Because clarity doesn't come from convincing others. It comes from standing still while the noise settles. Let this be your practice today. Say less. Remove the extra sentence. Leave the message unsent. Not as a tactic, but as a declaration. You don't need to narrate your worth. And remember this: confidence doesn't speak fast. It stands firm. 2. Silence forces others to face their behavior. Most people think silence means weakness. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Silence is pressure. When you stop explaining yourself, you remove the distraction. There are no more words for others to twist. No arguments to debate. No emotional hooks to pull. And suddenly, the focus shifts from your defense to their behavior. This is where silence becomes powerful. When someone disrespects you and you rush to explain, you give them an escape. They don't have to reflect. They don't have to take responsibility. But when you say nothing, when you don't justify, don't argue, don't chase, you force a mirror in front of them. And most people are deeply uncomfortable with mirrors. Stoicism understands human nature well. People often rely on your reaction to avoid examining themselves. Your explanations give them cover. Silence takes that cover away. Think about it in real life. A colleague talks over you or undermines your work. You send a long message explaining your intentions. What happens? They don't suddenly respect you more. They simply learn they can cross a line, and you'll respond with words. Now imagine the opposite. You pause. You withdraw attention. You stop feeding the situation. No drama, no confrontation, just absence. That absence creates tension, because now they have to sit with what they did, without your emotional labor softening the impact. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you always have the option of having no opinion. That doesn't mean being passive. It means refusing to participate in unnecessary conflict. Silence is not avoidance, it's restraint. And restraint unsettles people who expect reactions. Here's the key Stoic insight. When you don't react, you reclaim control of the situation. You're no longer responding to their mood, their tone, or their narrative. You're responding only to what aligns with your values, and this is where power quietly shifts. Some people will adjust their behavior. They'll reflect. They'll come back more respectful. Others will get irritated, confused, even angry. That reaction tells you everything you need to know, because people who benefit from your over-explaining hate your silence. Silence removes their leverage. It says, I'm not here to manage your emotions. I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to play this game. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If someone needs you to constantly explain yourself, to treat you decently, they were never respecting you. They were tolerating you. Stoicism doesn't beg for tolerance. It builds dignity. So what's the practice here? The next time you feel disrespected or misunderstood, don't rush to respond. Create a deliberate pause. 24 hours. No message, no clarification, no defense. Just stillness. Watch what happens. Do they step up? Do they reflect? Or do they reveal manipulation, entitlement, or indifference? Silence doesn't confuse mature people. It exposes immature ones. And most importantly, it protects you. Because every time you refuse to over-explain, you're training yourself to trust your own judgment. You're saying, I don't need immediate resolution. I don't need validation. I don't need to win this moment. That's Stoic strength. Remember this. Silence is not empty. It's full of boundaries. And boundaries are what separate people who command respect from those who constantly have to ask for it. 3. Over-explaining is self-betrayal. There is a moment most people ignore. A moment right after they've been disrespected. Right before they start explaining themselves. That moment is where self-betrayal begins. You feel it as tension in the chest, a need to fix the situation, a rush to restore balance. So you explain, but what you're really doing isn't communication, it's abandonment of your own dignity. Stoicism is very clear about this. Every time you act against your inner judgment to keep someone close, you weaken yourself. Over-explaining is not kindness. It's fear disguised as politeness. Think about the pattern. Someone crosses a line. You feel uncomfortable. Instead of setting a boundary, you try to make them understand. You explain your intentions, your tone, your past. And notice what happens next. They don't suddenly respect you more. They either ignore it, minimize it, or ask for more explanation. Because once you start negotiating your self-respect, there is no end to the negotiation. Epictetus warned against this exact trap. He taught that when you hand over control of your peace to others, you become their servant. And over-explaining is servitude. It says, I need you to agree with my reality. I need you to validate my feelings. I need your response to feel whole. That is not strength. That is dependency. Stoicism offers a harder but cleaner truth. Closure is not something other people give you. It's something you take. Most people keep explaining because they want closure. They want the other person to admit fault, to understand, to apologize. But here's the reality. If someone had the capacity to give you closure, they wouldn't have hurt you in the first place. So every explanation becomes another round in a game you can't win. The Stoic exits the game. Not with anger, not with speeches, but with quiet finality. This is where self-respect is restored. Instead of explaining, you do two things. First, you write the message you will not send. Put everything there, the clarity, the logic, the truth. Then you don't send it. Because that message isn't for them, it's for you. It's the act of acknowledging your own experience without asking permission for it to be valid. Second, you take one action that honors yourself. You redirect your energy. You go to the gym. You do your work. You advance your life. Action replaces explanation. And something subtle happens. The emotional charge fades, not because they changed, but because you stopped needing them to. That's Stoic maturity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that other people will act according to their nature. And his job was to guard his own, not to fix them, not to persuade them, not to educate them emotionally, just to remain aligned. Over-explaining is the opposite of alignment. It's choosing temporary relief over long-term self-trust. So let this be the rule. If someone requires you to abandon your dignity to keep their approval is worthless. Silence, in this case, is not punishment. It's closure. It's you saying, I've seen enough. I understand what this is. I don't need another round. And that is where real power returns. Because the strongest people don't get the last word. They get the last move. You don't need permission to move on. You only need the courage to stop explaining. 4. Actions reveal character. Words invite debate. Words invite debate. Actions reveal truth. This is one of the most important shifts a Stoic makes. When you rely on words, you enter arguments, explanations, interpretations. But when you step back and observe actions, the noise disappears. Stoicism teaches us to trust patterns, not promises. Anyone can say the right thing. Anyone can explain, apologize, or justify. But very few people consistently act with integrity. That's why words are cheap and actions are decisive. Think about how many conflicts drag on because of talking. You explain your side, they explain theirs. You debate intentions, they debate meanings. Nothing resolves because you're focused on language instead of behavior. A Stoic does the opposite. He watches. How do they act when there's no audience? How do they respond when you stop chasing clarity? Do they respect boundaries or test them? This is where silence becomes diagnostic. When you stop explaining, people reveal themselves. Some step up. They adjust their tone. They respect the boundary without needing a speech. Others do something very different. They push harder. They provoke. They twist the silence into guilt, blame, or pressure. That reaction is not confusion, it's exposure. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to be distracted by what people say, but to look at what they do and what they repeatedly choose. Because character lives in repetition, not in apologies, not in intentions, in patterns. Here's the Stoic lens to adopt. If someone's words and actions don't match, believe the actions, always. Words are designed to manage perception, actions reveal priorities. Someone who respects you doesn't need long explanations. They feel the boundary and adjust. Someone who benefits from crossing your boundaries will demand explanations. Because words are where they still have leverage. This is why over-explaining keeps you trapped. You're debating with someone who is watching to see how much you'll tolerate. So instead of engaging, you shift into observation mode. For 7 days, do this. Say less than usual. Respond slower than usual. Stop correcting misunderstandings that don't matter. And observe. Who becomes respectful? Who becomes irritated? Who disappears entirely? None of those outcomes are bad. They're information. Stoicism is not about controlling people. It's about seeing them clearly. When you rely on actions, not words, you stop personalizing behavior. You don't ask, why are they like this? You ask, what does this pattern tell me? And that question changes everything. Because now, you're not emotionally invested in outcomes. You're strategically aligned with reality. This is maturity. It's understanding that not everyone is meant to stay in your life, and not every misunderstanding needs clarification. Some situations resolve themselves the moment you stop feeding them with explanations. And this is where calm returns. Not because people suddenly behave better, but because you're no longer confused. Clarity comes from observation, not confrontation. Remember this principle. Words create noise. Actions create certainty. Once you internalize that, you stop arguing for respect and start recognizing where it actually exists. And when you see clearly, walking away becomes simple, not dramatic, not bitter, just accurate. 5. Not explaining is the highest form of self-respect. At the core of over-explaining, there is one fear most people won't name. The fear of being misunderstood. You worry that if you don't explain, people will get the wrong idea. They'll judge you unfairly. They'll tell a story about you that isn't true. So you try to correct the narrative. But Stoicism asks a harder question. Why are you trying to manage opinions you don't control? Marcus Aurelius warned against wasting life on guessing what others think of you. Because the moment you start defending your image, you stop living from your values. You start living from reactions. Not explaining yourself is not arrogance. It's alignment. It's choosing to be internally consistent instead of externally approved. A Stoic understands this clearly. You don't need everyone to understand you. You need to understand yourself. When your actions match your principles, misunderstanding loses its power. Some people will still misinterpret you. Some will project their own insecurities onto your silence. They'll call you cold, detached, uncaring. Let them. Those labels only sting when you're unsure of who you are. Self-respect means you don't rush to correct every false impression. Because you know something deeper. People who matter will watch your behavior, not your explanations. And people who don't respect you will never be convinced by words anyway. Here's the Stoic trade-off. Most people avoid. You can be endlessly explained or deeply respected. Rarely both. When you stop explaining, you accept a cost. You may lose people who are attached to your emotional availability. You may disappoint those who expected access to your inner world on demand. But what you gain is far greater. You gain stillness, consistency, authority over your own time and energy. Silence becomes a filter. Those who value you stay. Those who needed control quietly fall away. That's not loss, that's refinement. A Stoic doesn't chase being liked. He commits to being honorable, and honor doesn't require footnotes. There's a simple practice to anchor this mindset. When you feel the urge to explain, pause and say internally, "I'm acting according to my values." If that's true, stop there. No justification, no defense, no emotional labor. Let your consistency do the talking over time. Because respect is rarely won in moments. It's built through repetition, through showing up the same way, whether praised or misunderstood. This is why not explaining is the highest form of self-respect. It's a declaration that says, "I trust my judgment. I don't outsource my worth. I don't negotiate my peace." And once you internalize that, your presence changes. You speak less, but with more weight. You react slower, but with more precision. You walk away sooner from situations that cost too much. Remember this, you don't owe anyone clarity about your peace. Your life will explain itself over time. 6. Walk away. Quietly, that's the lesson. They remember. Most people announce their exits. They explain why they're done. They justify their decision. They want the last word. A Stoic does something far more powerful. He leaves quietly. No speeches, no warnings, no emotional summaries. Just absence, and that absence becomes the message. When you walk away without explaining, you deny people the drama they expect. You deny them the argument they want. You deny them the chance to rewrite the story in real time. Stoicism understands something critical about human psychology. People rarely remember what you said. They remember what changed, and nothing hits harder than changed access. Silence after disrespect is not confusion, it's consequence. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most people stay stuck because they imagine the fallout of leaving, the confrontation, the guilt, the questions. But when you leave quietly, most of that never happens. There is no explosion, no final scene, just distance, and distance forces reflection. When you disappear without explanation, people are left alone with themselves. They replay interactions, they question what they did, they notice the absence of your energy. Some will understand, some will feel regret, some will feel anger. None of that is your responsibility. A Stoic doesn't leave to teach a lesson. He leaves to protect his peace. The lesson is simply a byproduct. Here's the Stoic exit protocol. First, no reaction. You don't escalate. You don't retaliate. You don't defend. Second, no justification. You don't explain why you're stepping back. You don't negotiate boundaries after they've been crossed. Third, no checking back. You don't monitor their response. You don't look for signs of remorse or validation. This is discipline. Because the moment you check back, you reopen the loop. Walking away quietly means accepting uncertainty without trying to control the narrative. And that's where most people fail. They want closure and control. Stoicism teaches you must choose. Closure comes from alignment, not from conversation. When your actions match your values, the nervous system settles. You stop rehearsing arguments. You stop replaying conversations. You stop needing them to understand. That's freedom. And here's the paradox. The less you try to make people understand why you left, the more seriously your departure is taken. Because silence communicates finality. It says, this was not impulsive. This was considered. This is done. No threats, no ultimatums, just resolve. And resolve is rare. Most people come back, they soften, they negotiate with themselves. A Stoic doesn't. He understands that returning to what violated his values teaches others how to treat him next time. So he stays gone, not out of bitterness, but out of respect for himself. Remember this principle. You don't announce your exit. You just leave and let reality speak. That's the lesson people remember, not the words, not the explanations, the change. 7. The 7-day Stoic ritual. Stop explaining. System understanding is not enough. Stoicism is not philosophy you admire. It's discipline you practice. So let's turn everything you've learned into a simple, structured system. One you can follow for 7 days to break the habit of over-explaining. This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. Day 1, awareness audit. Today, you observe. Notice every moment you feel the urge to explain yourself, not just out loud, internally. Ask, who am I explaining to? What am I afraid will happen if I don't? Is this explanation necessary or emotional? Write down just 3 situations. No judgment, only awareness. Because you can't change a pattern you refuse to see. Day 2, boundary language. Today, you prepare silence with structure. Write 3 short sentences you'll use instead of explaining, I'm comfortable with my decision. That doesn't work for me. I've already considered this. No details, no defense. Stoicism favors clarity over comfort. Boundaries spoken calmly need no follow-up. Day 3, 24-hour, no react window. Today, you slow everything down. If something triggers you, a message, a comment, a tone, you wait 24 hours before responding. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to regain control. Most emotional explanations disappear when urgency fades. Silence reveals whether a response is needed at all. Day 4, observation log. Today you watch behavior. Say less. Explain nothing unnecessary. Then write, what happened? How did they react to my silence? What did this reveal? Patterns emerge quickly when words are removed, and patterns don't lie. Day 5. Self-granted closure. Today, you stop waiting. Write a letter you will never send. Say everything you wanted them to understand. Then close it. Because closure doesn't come from agreement. It comes from acceptance. You don't need their response to move forward with dignity. Day 6. Energy. Recall today. You reclaim attention. Mute conversations that drain you. Unfollow noise. Step back from places where you feel the need to perform. This is not avoidance, it's conservation. Stoics guard energy the way warriors guard strength. Day 7. Value. Oath. Today, you choose your standard. Write 1 sentence you will live by. I choose peace over explanation. I let my actions speak. I don't negotiate my self-respect. Read it every morning. This is your anchor. By the end of 7 days, something shifts. You speak less, but with intention. You react slower, but with precision. You feel lighter because you're no longer carrying conversations that lead nowhere. This is not silence as withdrawal. This is silence as self-command. And once you experience that clarity, you'll never want to explain yourself the old way again. You don't need to explain yourself to be understood. You need to live in a way that makes explanations unnecessary. Today, you learned a simple but brutal Stoic truth. The more you talk to defend your worth, the more you give it away. When you stop explaining, you stop negotiating your peace. When you choose silence, you choose alignment. And when your actions stay consistent, time does the explaining for you. This isn't about being cold, it's about being centered. Not reactive, not defensive, not available for every misunderstanding, just grounded. Remember what we covered. Explaining often comes from fear. Silence forces, clarity, over. Explaining is self-betrayal. Actions reveal character. Self-respect needs no justification. And walking away quietly is sometimes the strongest move you'll ever make. Stoicism doesn't promise an easier life. It promises a stronger one. So from this point forward, Let this be your standard. Speak when it matters. Act with consistency, and let the rest fall away. If this message resonated with you, support the channel by liking and subscribing, and leave a comment with this affirmation to lock it in. My actions speak for me. Until next time, stay disciplined, stay grounded, and protect your peace.